John Kerry, the guy who's supposed to be the savior, our savior against George W. Bush Jr. This shows how far gone the Democratic Party was. Where I don't know if you guys remember, I remember this growing. I didn't know this growing up. I learned this afterwards. Like I wasn't old enough to vote, so I didn't really pay attention to 2004. I remember my 6th grade or 7th grade teacher. I forgot exactly how old I was. She came in, like the right wing would be hella mad at her today. You know, they freak out about teachers now. But she came in after George W. Bush Jr. won again, after John Kerry lost. Bro, she had a mental breakdown in the classroom. I would never forget this shit. She's like, our country is shit. So she's like, I still remember this to this day because I'm like, bro, if the internet existed back then, she would have got fired, bro. Because, and I don't say her name, I loved her. She was a great teacher. She came in. I can't believe she won. He won again, like in front of us. We had no idea what the fuck was going on. And then that's how I learned. I'm like, dude, he won. I just knew he sucked. I'm like, this dude won again? What? I thought that John Kerry opposed the war. No, I learned later that John Kerry didn't have a substantive criticism of the war. His criticism of the war was that George W. Bush Jr. wasn't waging it correctly. So he wasn't even anti-war. So you had the easiest guy ever to beat. You had a guy who waged a legal war where you can literally rally an anti-war populace. Like this is when the height of the Iraq War protests. Instead of doing that, the Democrats ran a guy who was like, let's run. I have my criticism that we're not running the war correctly. This guy, John Kerry, and he still got a lot of influence in the Democrat Party. He was Joe Biden's climate envoy.
Yeah, that's a joke.
And people wonder why Joe Biden sucks on the climate. Anyway, let me preface. I'll shut the fuck up now. I'll read a tweet because it's going to be in French. So I'll read the tweet. It says, so this French TV host asked John Kerry if there isn't a double standard between the United States position on Putin for its war of aggression and the fact that they don't think those standards apply to Bush for Iraq. John Kerry, embarrassed, replies that Iraq wasn't a war of aggression. So I
saw this video. I had this video saved too. I didn't know we were going to get
we was on
I'm glad to. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Nick and CJ foreign policy.
Goodness, this is terrible.
So listen to this.
Vous, les Américains, vous avez commis le crime d'agression en Irak. Et ces pays...
I already kind of, there are no subtitles here, but I think you can hear what Kerry saying, I believe. But this is pretty much Kerry saying the Iraq war isn't a war of aggression. And remember, 2.3 million dead Iraqis. 10 million plus displaced. Conservative numbers.
Pays du Sud disent, mais est-ce qu'il faut juger George Bush? Pourquoi un George Bush n'est pas jugé de la même façon? Vous y seriez favorable?
No.
Non.
Pourquoi?
Because there's never even been
parce que
a direct process.
Il n'y a pas eu d'accusation à l'encontre du président Bush. Alors s'il y avait eu des abus de pouvoir, oui. Moi, j'étais contre. J'ai fait la guerre du Vietnam. Il y avait des abus, j'en ai parlé. Et à la fin de la guerre, il y a eu.
Est-ce que ça n'était pas un crime d'agression d'entrer en Irak?
I'm gonna say they put the French commentator over his statement.
Yeah,
but I'll play at least a little. You guys see the raw video, but this is where John Kerry says the United States waging war in Iraq is not a war of aggression. And you guys, this is why I got into independent citizen journalism. And I am not bullshitting you guys when I say this. Like a lot of people like to mock this shit. Oh, you're a YouTuber. Oh, you're a blogger. Nigga, this shit is important. And I never ever allow people to gaslight me into thinking what I'm doing you're just a YouTuber. No, we need a proletariat pushback against the long-standing tradition of the ruling class just rewriting history. If we don't have citizen journalists, they're going to completely rewrite the history of Iraq. They already rewriting the history of George W. Bush. Already doing it. And there's so much shit in the past, and I'll tell you guys, I'm going to spare you guys the long history story, where they just lie about us, about the genocide of the indigenous people. They lie about us about every fucking war. And then now they banning real topics because this critical race theory culture war. And the ruling class and the imperialists always win and rewrite history. Are we going to allow that to happen? So what they're going to do now in the future with Democrats and liberals, they're going to downplay the effects of the Iraq war. And they're going to hope people will forget over time. They know it's not going to happen immediately. Why didn't they wait 15, 20 years later? And then imagine 2030. Then 2040. Then 2050. 2050, you're going to have John Kerry's grandson. He's going to give a speech how, man, a lot of people misunderstand. George W. Bush, he really went on Iraq with care in his heart. When he waged the war against Iraq, Saddam was evil. The American people was on the side. We made some miscalculations, but it mostly was a positive war. And then you're gonna have some jack off, maybe Jake Tapper's grandkid. Maybe he's gonna be sitting there nodding along. And then, and then 2050, the war on Iraq gonna be forever remembered as a war of us liberating the Iraqi people. You gotta think this is crazy. That's what happened in the past. That literally exactly what happened to every single atrocity that the West committed. It became less egregious, less atrocious. Then we start humanizing people. George W. Bush had slaves. George Washington had slaves. Yeah, Abraham Lincoln had still support brutal slavery tactics. These people have moral flaws, but you gotta start getting that shit. So we gotta that's my long spill on that.
Let me pull up because I found a tweet that has some translation because if you couldn't hear him talking, you know what he says. I found a couple of tweets here that shows the translation of that conversation, even though it's brief, but let me put it up on the screen. And Glenn Greenwald also covers this too, and we'll get to his tweet in just a second. But let's look at this tweet here. We don't need to play the sound. John Kerry, West must hold Putin accountable for Iraq. And the French reporter says, West must hold Putin accountable for Ukraine. And then French reporter says, like Bush with Iraq. And then Kerry says, no. That's when we heard him clearly say no. And he say, but that was a lie, is what the reporter says. And then John Kerry says, no. Well, you can see that John Kerry was flustered. He didn't expect this question. He says, well, that has never been a direct accusation. If you don't have the accusation, that doesn't make it exist. Just because somebody doesn't publicly accuse you of that, it's just a bad comeback. But go ahead, and I'll get to the next translation.
He was probably flabbergasted and surprised that this reporter was asking him the follow-up questions. He's like, Macron, you better fucking tighten down in your grip on the media. What the fuck? What the fuck you doing? Why the fuck are these journalists asking us questions? like you're probably surprised.
But it speaks to their narrative control is not where it used to be. You know what I'm saying? Like they're having these sort of things that happen out of the blue, and they're caught off guard. And this is one of them. But let me go to where is it? Glenn Greenwald's tweet and just read it before we close this topic. And that's this one here. And let me blow it up a little bit and see what Greenwald breaks it down. Glenn says, this is hilarious. John Kerry is on a tour flamboyantly depicting Russia as a rogue state for invading a sovereign country, only for French journalists, and they point out his name, Darius Rochman, to remind him that the U.S. has invaded multiple countries, and Kerry himself voted to authorize the Iraq war, and then they play it. Let me read this other part too. So this French TV host asked John Kerry if there's any double standard between the U.S. position on Putin for his war of aggression and the fact that they don't think those standards apply to Bush for Iraq. John Kerry, embarrassed, replies, Iraq wasn't a war of aggression. What could he mean by that, Nick? Even from the imperialist standpoint, how would he be able to say that wasn't a war of aggression? Is he trying to say, this is all because of Saddam Hussein? Go ahead. Yeah, there we go.
Well, that's the neocon angle that the Bush administration and the neocons spread during my high school years, that we're there to liberate Iraq, right? So they didn't work for 15 to 20 years. You had Donald Trump call out Jeb Bush for his family war crimes, and that's something I was still hold close to my heart. That moment where Donald Trump said that you guys lied about Iraq. He called out Jeb Bush to his face during a Republican primary. And this is like common knowledge.
Yeah, I
right?
remember.
But now the liberal establishment, because they rehabilitated George W. Bush, now they love the CIA. Now they love the military-industrial complex. Now they offer big profit for Raytheon and et cetera. Now they're just straight up trying to rewrite history and use that liberate Iraq line. So the John Kerrys, the Bidens, and the neocons, the Liz Cheney's part of that now. Their narrative around that war is going to be, we try to liberate Iraq, which is a joke. But, hey, over time, we're going to change the textbooks. We're going to be repetitive in our propaganda. Oh, them fucking proletarians, they have no networks. They have no way to educate each other. So we're just going to repeat this, and then a few decades, a few generations, we're going to have them repeating it. Oh, you know they went to liberate Iraq? Oh, 2 million dead. Oh, man, that's just not their fault. Not their fault. That's unfortunate.
Casualty of war.
Liberation. I mean, they were greeted as liberators. You know that, right? You know, like, you have a lot of people that misunderstood the mission, right? All these accusations of war crimes, Russian disinformation. You see what happened to Julian Assange. That's why they tried to kill Julian Assange. So that shit, that WikiLeaks report, gonna be wiped from history. If the proletariat allows it. If
it's all up to the proletariat.
If anti-imperialist media didn't exist, if we get wiped out, we get censored to death, that's gonna be our reality. If people decide to if they back down from challenging these people, they get comfortable, they take the position that the NATO left. And I know I'm being dramatic right now, but this is the position of the NATO left, guys. The NATO left surrendered on foreign policy. The NATO left said, Democrat, take the wheel. We're not going to question it. So I'm talking about them. Like, I know it sounds dramatic. I know it sounds like I'm joking, but this is literally their worldview. Let them handle it. We be all right.